Good afternoon. Good afternoon. All right, well, that's better. I'm looking around and I'm seeing a lot of faces, but I only heard one or two of you. I'm Clarice Summersall. I'm one of the senior administrators here at Montgomery College, and I'm very pleased to welcome you to a presentation by Christopher Smith from Accenture. On behalf of President Pollard, our president of Montgomery College, the Board of Trustees, administrators, faculty, and staff here, I'd like to welcome our Accenture partners to this third presentation by an Accenture executive during this fall semester. This special presentation, Big Data, features Mr. Smith talking about his expertise and experiences in managing big data, dealing with cybersecurity and cloud computing. He has an impressive credentials, and he will be sharing his expertise and experience with us. Mr. Charles Holland, the professor for many of you in this room, will be introducing Mr. Smith momentarily. Our partnership with Accenture provides a wonderful opportunity to empower you, our students, to examine your options for a world of work, the world of work that you might presently be in or you will be continuing in as students and employees. We live in a global economy, and global awareness and global preparedness are essential skills. You're going to be competing with people from Bethesda and Bangladesh, from Gaithersburg and Ghana. And we are excited about the opportunities that Montgomery College is presenting to you today. We are thrilled with the partnership that we have with Accenture that we started during the last academic year. Accenture's Skills to Succeed initiative is designed to equip 250,000 people globally with helping people to acquire jobs or to enhance the skills that they currently have. With Mr. Smith giving of his time, talents, and energy to you, our students, what a tremendous opportunity for you to have a glimpse into the world of work through the lens of a professional who operates on the national stage. And he operates in person and virtually. It's important for you to recognize that you have to have contemporary skills in order to be successful. Many thanks to our Montgomery College team that is working on the partnership with Accenture and our Accenture representatives who are here today. And I'd like to introduce you to Nigel Stevens, who is one of the executives from Accenture, and Letitia Roberson, another executive from Accenture. And now I'd like to introduce Professor Charles Holland, who is a professor here at the Tacoma Park Silver Spring campus, and he will formally introduce our keynote speaker for today, Christopher Smith.
Accenture is a global management consulting, outsourcing, and technology service company. Mr. Christopher Smith is currently the U.S. Federal Chief Technology Officer at Accenture. He oversees the services provided by Accenture to their federal clients in the areas of cloud computing, big data, logistics, and supply chain management. Prior to joining Accenture, he was the Chief Information Officer at the U.S. Department of Agriculture, and there he led one of the largest government transitions to cloud computing. He's here today to talk to you about big data. I'd like to present to you Mr. Christopher Smith.
Thank you, Professor. Thanks. Thanks to you both for the very kind introduction. Good afternoon. I hope everybody's doing well. It's a fine day out there. It would be nice if we were actually maybe out on the green doing this, but we are in here. I'm not virtual. We're all here in person today. Quick show of hands. Who's in stats class right now? Taking stats. You'll all be taking stats at some point, but the ones that are in it right now are living the dream, right? What about business? Business? Any computer scientists in the room? What other classes do we have going on? Is that it for this group? Accounting, okay. Any geospatial sciences or environmental practices or anything like that? Well, in reality, we're all dealing with information. President Obama at the beginning of his administration talked about the true national treasure we have in our information. It really doesn't matter what field you're going to go into or what you're doing today. The ability to take information and create value in it, whether you're working for the federal government and trying to find a way to better serve citizens, whether it's in the Forest Service and firefighting, and you could take information down from overhead sensors to unmanned vehicles, UAVs over your head, or radio traffic coming across, and better serve those individuals, save their lives, save their property, or if you're out on the front lines of defense and getting information that's critical to you carrying out your mission, everything from will you have the spectrum to communicate without hindrance? Will you be able to have the logistics there to supply you? Do you know where your left and right flank are? Or if it's in business and you're trying to improve the bottom line, attract more customers, it's all about the information we've got at our disposal. And we're really at this point in history that we're collecting more of it than we ever have. And it's going at such a rate. I actually want to start with a video. But before I do that, how many of you all know what big data is or think you know what big data is? That's okay. Sometimes in this industry, we get a big idea and we really market it very, very hard. So it's okay that you're not saying, hey, I get it, I know what it is. I think by the end of the day, you'll have a very good understanding of what it is, and you'll be basically prepared to go on into your careers, in whatever field you choose, and utilize some of these techniques and capabilities. I'm going to talk a little bit about a definition, a background of why we're talking about it, a high-level architecture, because I think it's important that you understand it's really some of the technologies that we've got in our portfolios today that are enabling us to collect that information at a very low cost and to find those value points and change the outcomes that you're working on. We're going to talk a little bit about the talent, and that's why I was asking what classes you're in. There are some very hard math skills that are needed out there across the globe to make sure that we can find the value in the information, and then we'll open it up to some conversations. Just think about what you're doing in your daily lives with the devices that are on your hip or in your purse or in your pocket today. We are texting, tweeting, sending pictures, communicating, making reservations. You name it, we're doing it. We are becoming the agents of information day in and day out. This is a graphic of what happens every minute and every day. There were some big numbers up on the video that I just talked about. But think about it. Google receives over 2 million search queries in 60 seconds. There's 204 million email users sending something every 60 seconds. Blogs, 27,000 published in new posts every minute. In 2011, the amount of data that went wirelessly across the global networks was 8 times the size of all data that went across wired internet in 2000. And for the last 4 years, it's been doubling every year. Think about that. Think about the amount of data that's coming in and what are we doing with that and how can we improve people's lives. It's staggering. Of that data, nearly 2/3 of it, or excuse me, half right now, is video. And it was expected, this data that I'm talking to you about actually comes out of the Cisco Global Data Forecast that they do every year. I'm citing the 2012 report. In 2011, when they put the report out, they believed that the number of handheld and mobile devices would be more than humans on the planet. In 2016, they revised that down to 2015 in this year's report. And I just saw something the other day that said we may hit it this year. So think about that. And most of us are carrying more than one of these devices. I don't know if you saw the numbers of handheld device owners around the globe, but it's more people than have power right now, by the tens of millions. Individuals who do not have power day in and day out for their quality of life, yet can communicate over a device that has computing capability that we used to have sitting on our desktop. So the amount of data is staggering. I could go on, but let's start to peel this back a little bit and talk about what is big data. You'll hear basically a definition that talks about the 3 V's. Technically, people will say there's more V's than 3. This diagram starts to lay that out, but it's really about volume. Very, very large amounts of data coming in. Velocity that is coming in near real time, and sometimes in real time. So think about the tweets that go on, Yelp. If you're out at a restaurant, you liked what you had, you're talking about that, you're on Foursquare. Real-time data coming in constantly. And last, variety. In many cases, this is not data that we planned for in any necessarily meaningful way. So in the old school way of doing things, which is just a year or two ago, 3 years ago, we were basically setting up very structured databases to capture the information that we thought was so most meaningful to us. Big data really starts to say that we can't be prepared for all of that. We're going to do our best. We will continue to have that legacy infrastructure that allows us to look at what's going on. But in many cases, it's going to be new data coming at us in those 3 V's. It's going to be very large, it's going to be very varied, and it's going to be at a very high speed. At the middle of this, we're trying to make meaning of the information. So down along the bottom, you see all of that information coming in. How do we then have a means to capture and find value or meaning in that information? That's what big data does for us. In many cases, this data is sitting unused at this point. Again, why there was a need to have a set of technological capabilities, a set of process frameworks to take this information and derive meaning from it. And as we go on, we build up to this, I'm going to come to some, I think, very meaningful sets of examples that will help bring this home to you. The other things that were going on as we were starting to capture this data, the cost of compute was going down demonstrably. You'll hear about the consumerization of IT, right? And that's the point that when you can carry a device on you that can carry out most of the calculations you just needed a desktop to do a number of years ago, the capability to take that information in and compute anywhere at any time is extraordinarily powerful. So as that's gone down, so has the cost to store this information. So if we can compute and store on just about every piece of information that comes in, we can again start to draw corollaries about things heretofore were unknown to us. The video, I think, said this very well. It's simply large amounts of data coming in very quickly, and in many cases it's unstructured. So we didn't have a plan on how to deal with it. Where does this data really come from? We put the video up there. We talked about some of the social media aspects of it, but if you look at it internally as to what a government or a business creates day in and day out, that's where we were spending our time structuring for information to determine what was going on. If you're in the financial transactions business, you're a credit card company, you were very focused on understanding what your clients' buying patterns were and that information that came through so that you could upsell to them the next time around. You could sell to the side. You could give them the things that they needed for themselves. So we had these monolithic ERP systems, enterprise resource planning, Oracles and SAPs of the world. As mobile devices started to come in, we had mobile information on where our employees were starting to go, but generally speaking, we were trying to connect them with that back-end legacy information in the ERPs. On the machine side, since we've been in an internet age for at least 15 years now, you hear clickstream. You ever hear that term? But basically it is that every movement out there on the internet, generally speaking, is captured. So if you've ever done something electronically, it's there ad infinitum. There are not a lot of ways to destroy that information. So those patterns in our work lives, in our personal lives, and how we purchase are very meaningful to certain companies that want to sell you something in your life. Or if you're on the business side of that and you're interested in getting a larger part of the customer base, all that information comes in. And we've been pretty good about tracking that. But with the explosion of social media on the outside or down below the line, we've just had this torrent of information coming at us. And think about the device you're carrying around now with you. In many cases, we don't use all the aspects of it, but pretty much it's location-based. Even if you turn your GPS off, if you're within a certain range of 2 to 3 towers, your location can be triangulated, correct? And that's used for emergency services. and other purposes. But we've got all this location information now with the way you live your life. And again, for a company who wants to sell you and cross-sell you and wants to help you in life, whether you're going through some series of events, you're getting married, you want to buy a house, you name it, or health care outcomes. That information starts to become very important in how you travel, how you move, where you are. So you tie that with macroeconomic or public data. Large aggregate data sets about health outcomes from the federal government, for instance. That information is aggregated so there's no personally identifiable information. But the reality is, take what I was just talking about in your personal life, how you shop, what you're looking for in terms of medication, skin care, you name it. You take that macroeconomic data and put it on top. It becomes extraordinarily powerful. We can look at what are the outcomes in a given area, what's happening with flu as it moves across the nation. Can we help people stop that from occurring? Again, it becomes very, very powerful. So all of this data is coming together. On the top, we were structuring it, looking for meaning. Now we're taking this other set of information coming at us from many, many directions, and we're drawing correlations mathematically to say we believe that something is going to occur. Predictive analysis. Or what path do most people take when they're going to solve a given problem? So we've got the rise in transaction volume, the rise in unstructured data that I just talked about. We've got this shift outward where we've been internally focused as a business or a government trying to take the information we had at our disposal and solve problems. We've now got this outward bound set of information coming in. Talked a little bit about storage and architectures changing and it becoming very cheap to compute, very cheap to collect this data. Another factor, the social aspect, that we are all now connected nearly 24 hours a day. Even though your phone is off and sitting next to you, there's information that flows through that device. How do you think your alarm clock knows when to wake up and wake you up? The device is never really off. And then we've got this idea of everything being open. So the sense that we can develop tools, techniques, and capabilities that everybody can help ideate upon and create better, stronger products starts to build upon itself. In the middle of that, you've got all of that information coming together. And how do we use analytical capabilities that we've had, mathematical capabilities that we have, with this new technology, since we can capture and store these things, to draw more informed conclusions, to make better decisions about our defense, better decisions about our environmental practices, better decisions as a business as to what markets to go into, where should I site my store. If people are moving around and they like certain things, can I sell them something as they're walking down the street? So I think you've got now an idea of big data. And so when somebody asks you, what is big data, you should have a good feeling of what that is and what that means. I'm going to go a little deeper on the technical side, just to say the why that we're doing this. And that's one, there's missed opportunities out there. The more data we get and the less we look at it, and it gets bigger and bigger and bigger, we're missing very important things to our business or to citizen service or to national defense. A good example of this is 9/11. We were collecting huge amounts of information, extraordinary amounts of information, but unfortunately those pieces of information were not computed, they were not developed into a set of links that would have allowed us to understand that certain players in certain parts of the world were intent on carrying things out at our doorstep, right? So I think that's a good example of missed opportunities. Low latency requirements really just gets to the point that the networks that we're building, I talked a little bit about mobile data and how much stuff is flowing back and forth, that we have higher and higher demands to move that information to a point in which we can actually calculate against it and find out some of these things. Management complexity is just that organizations generally are not structured to deal with this. Culturally, an organization, whether it's a government or an industry, commercially facing, has stovepipes within it. The marketing office doesn't necessarily talk to the sales office doesn't necessarily talk to the tech group as much as they should. And so you have a culture of people holding certain parts of information. And the point is, if you liberate that data, And you allow people to look across that and look for those correlations so that you can find out what's the next product, what's the most innovative thing I can do out there, can I better serve the citizen? You're going to do that much more quickly if you have all the information and you're applying all of the minds across an organization to solve that problem. This graph, I think, does a good job of laying that out. If you look at the x-axis along the bottom, it says that basically the size of the information getting bigger over time, and the latency being that network or the ability to move this data and then to compute against it going up. There's a sweet spot in there that you want to be at. And the point is, in the current state, we've got the data growing at a more and more rapid pace. We're just starting to get the technologies over the last few years to really be able to compute strongly against this. It has been going on for a number of years. It's not a new science into itself or an art unto itself. But the reality is those cost reductions in storage, the ability to compute, the ability to move this information and collect it is allowing us now to take these new technologies, these new processes and frameworks to arrive at better conclusions and better decisions. This next chart is just a little different way of laying that out, and it says that basically as big data increases to the right and management complexity increases, you're going to be better off with the big data approaches because they're new. They know how to deal with this information. You're going to be able to draw the conclusions you're looking to draw, whereas we will not be able to scale and keep up if we really try to make monolithic databases and data warehouses that try to answer every problem. It's the rational model that you guys learn in your studies, is that you can't take every piece of information, collect all the way to the point that you know all given outcomes, and then make a decision, because you'll never get there, right? It's more of the incremental and muddling through. You basically take the information, and we're going to talk a little bit about that, and you try to discover as much as you can up front, then capture that information, structure it in a meaningful way, and derive that business conclusion that helps you move forward. I talked a little bit about this a minute ago. What you've really got to do is free the data. And you've got to have a set of fluid frameworks that are going to allow you to reveal that information out, discover it, and then you need the capacity to compute large amounts of data, huge data sets, complex mathematical algorithms, and statistical problems to find out what it is that you're looking for. I talked a little bit about this culturally. If you can't access the data, you're going nowhere. In reality, if this stuff sits in stovepipe legacy data systems, as it has, I was in the Department of Agriculture for the last 5 years as CIO. We had huge operations, about $100 billion in active portfolio and everything from housing to farm loan programs to the logistical systems for fighting fires. Every organization over time, which was natural as information technology came out, built their own legacy system. And they built a specific data warehouse for this organization and a specific one for that organization. And large commercial entities did this as well. We've gone through a great consolidation over time in most organizations, but the reality is if we house this information in one format, up until the advent of these big data approaches, we couldn't share that data back and forth. So you even had structured data sets, but when you try to bring them together, they're really unstructured because they were not following the same formats. So the silos do continue to this day, but there's been great forward momentum on reducing it, and we'll see that over time. And the reality is, while you will need large-scale data warehousing to go forward and relational database sets, this very large data that's flowing in from us, from social media and from other channels, really does not need to be treated in that manner. So we're not going to spend a lot of time developing further legacy environments to build that. We're going to take the legacy environments we have, we'll improve them, we'll refine them, but we'll take these new approaches and tie the data together to get meaningful results. This next chart basically lays out why these new technologies are allowing us to move forward at a much greater clip. If you look at the pie chart to the left, the largest amount of time was actually spent on data preparation. It's what I just talked about with all these legacy data sets. We had to build monolithic dimensional table sets, and basically you pull your information out of an online transaction processing system, you grab just that information you need, you extract it, you transform it, and you layer it into your reporting or data warehousing system, and then you report against it. Well, the new paradigm, the pie chart on the right, says Let's not do that. We've got all these big data sets. Let's not try to capture it all. Let's actually push the discovery and the exploration up front and not prep all the other data. Let's just get the data we want, and then let's execute against that. Let's apply our algorithms to that. Let's get to the business outcome we were looking for. Instead of the old IT mantra of, yep, I'll get more servers, I'll build the cluster out, I'll get the information architecture right, I'll see you in about 3 or 4 months. I assure you it will be right, and it will cost, X millions of dollars. The reality is we don't have the time. There are needs for that, and we will continue to do that. But these capabilities allow us to much more rapidly develop processes and frameworks to distribute the compute. We'll look at a chart in just a second that allows you to do that, and get to the meaningful business outcome that you set out for in the first place. One more chart just to hammer home that the point is, as we collect larger and larger amounts of data, if they go unprocessed, we will not find the value in all the collection of the information that we've got going on. It goes back to that national treasure that the president talked about. This information that we've got is the intellectual property that will drive our economic engine forward. It's what makes us creative. It drives our quality of life. It leads to new research and development. It is really limitless what we can do with the amount of information collected. I talked about the cultural aspects. Here's a maturity curve, because no IT guy can stand up there without talking about the maturity curve of where we were and where we're going to. In the beginning of analysis and information collection, it was really about aggregating and developing those specific data sets that were going to inform us on how we best solve our business problems or best deliver services and goods and products. We've made great progress in business intelligence reporting. So how do we model that data and then draw that meaningful contextual conclusion out so that we can act upon it? Traditional statistics being involved. But now we're moving to this much more fluid framework of parallel distribution of large amounts of data and applying new analytical capabilities to achieve our goals. I talked about moving the exploration and the discovery up front, because that's what's critically important. If you're dealing with petabytes upon petabytes of data and information, you will not be able to take that information, store it in a structured way, and crunch against it. You're going to have to push that discovery and analysis up front and execute as quickly as you can. For those technical folks in the room, what I've been talking about from the database side is relational database management systems. We're generally focused for developing monolithic reporting. Very, very good, and continue to be an important part of what we do. But new technologies such as Hadoop allow us to distribute compute across multiple nodes, split up the workload, then basically find out those things that we talked about discovery and bring them back in very quickly. Think of Google. That's where Hadoop, Apache Hadoop came from. Google, when we talked about them doing 2 million searches in a minute. It's extraordinary. So where we saw Amazon in the e-commerce space and Google utilizing these capabilities first, we're now seeing mainstream business lines use these to find value. Last architectural diagram. I was going to draw a little bit up here. I'll save you guys from that. The enterprise data warehouse and that legacy layer I talked about on the top remain important, will be so into the future. But what you see is below that, that ability to go in, take large sets of data, and apply these analytic techniques against it, and to take multiple non-standard data sets, do that discovery, structure that in a way in which you can pull the information out. So I'm going to stop talking about technology and process. I will just say on these last couple charts before I give you some real examples, because I think that's one of the most difficult things as we talk about big data. There's been a lot of forward movement in it, but a lot of time has been spent on the technology. I think it's important that you all, as you make your determinations on your career paths, understand that whatever you do, it's important that you do understand to the extent necessary why these things are possible now and how you can use them to your best benefit. The analytics solutions and capabilities are applied over the top of those layers of architecture I talked to you about. And I can talk after the meeting on this. But I want to get to some actual examples of where we're using big data and how we're doing it today. So those 4 quadrants should look pretty similar. It's where I started before I did the technical deep dive. And that is that there's internal information coming out of many, many business systems. And there's these external feeds coming in now at extraordinarily high volumes. In the example I'm going to show you, basically taking those gray boxes, which is some of that macro and external facing information, and applying it back inwards against those cream colored or tan legacy systems. So here's a good example. And I'm going to take them a little out of order because actually Jim gets married before he goes to buy a house, but you'll get the point here. So Jim has saved enough for a house deposit based on previous contact. He follows up with the bank to start a mortgage application. Well, that wasn't really where it started. In fact, the bank was sophisticated enough to know he was out looking around at other sites. He was on Zillow. He was out talking to folks and friends and tweeting and foursquaring about, hey, I saw this property I would really like to get. So he actually comes into the bank, and the bank already has a profile of that because the bank knows from Jim's shopping habits and movements that, in fact, he was probably ready to do this. So this is what we would call a next best action or a key life event. Using all that external data that heretofore the bank never had, they will know before a customer comes in they're probably going to apply for some sort of financial help. Can be scary, and we'll talk a little bit about the privacy aspects of this because I think it's important that we do. But the reality is that information is all public on the privacy sites of all those. Basically clicked in, so I opt in, I want this information out there. Well, the bank knows the credit worthiness of this individual. They know that all these things are starting to happen. Instead of him calling, how about they send him a note that says, hey, we've got this great mortgage rate. We just went down below 3% for a 30-year fixed mortgage. And oh, by the way, if they happen to have a financial title company involved with them, that could come in from another angle as well, right? But you can walk through the flow here, and the point is the bank, instead of being caught unaware or maybe getting that individual's business, he could have gone down the street and gone to somebody else. So you take all of these external factors that are indicating that something's going to occur, and you ping Jim and say, hey, we want you as a customer for life. We know this is important to you. Here's our best rate. And oh, by the way, if you look at this, they also know that the company he was working for is doing very well in the stock market. So he's a good credit rating again. And I said they know he was looking for other things to help him do this. I'm going to skip one over and I'm going to come back to the other one. This is where I went a little out of order, but Jim was dating Julie and his spending habits started to change. Go figure, right? They wasn't hanging out in the same places, wasn't staying out late, you know. So all these indicators start showing up, right, to the bank. And the bank says, well, you know, this is interesting. Maybe Jim wants to go buy a diamond ring. Individual. And I'm not going to go into detail on this, is that with all these indicators, an individual is likely to take some path. You can call it a next best event, next best action if you're trying to sell something. You can call it a key life event if it's an individual. So let's change gears a little bit and do a mobile one. I talked a little bit about this, but so John is moving through town, and he's just come off the train, walking on foot, multimodal transportation, foursquaring, hey, I'm here, I'm there. Walking down the street, well, those buying patterns are known as he moves through a given neighborhood, and this is where e-commerce is going. An organization may be there, it may be 5 o'clock in the evening, happy hour's on, let's send that to this individual and say, hey, you want to stop in? We got half-price appetizers and drinks. He also happens to be a sports fan, right? So got tickets to the game. Tickets to the game are available. Extraordinarily compelling if you think about market capture and what an organization who is in e-commerce wants to do. I look at it slightly differently. I was just an employee of the federal government, and I thought about how I traveled and the information I wanted. And you know, I was actually getting away from the GPS. I would take a tablet with me wherever I'd go because it was much more rich interaction. I could get my tickets to the game. I could figure out my hotel reservation. If I needed to change my plane on the fly, I could do that. And all that information is out there, so an organization can take advantage of that. And it's extraordinarily compelling. So I'll change gears one more time and give you another example. And when I talked about a firefighter out in the field, what if the firefighter, as they're showing up to a location, the way fighting usually goes down is there's an event that breaks out in some forest, and actually the state, local, folks from all over the country need to come in. Sometimes you even bring the military in to help fight it, depending on how big of a fire it is. All these people come in from remote locations. They're all different. They're all carrying different devices. The question is, how can we take contextual information and get it to them no matter what kind of device they're carrying, and serve that information up in a way in which they can execute on it. And so if a fire camp comes together and they can be in on the front line fighting that fire much more quickly, contextually based, with all this data used at their fingertips. As I said, we have overhead sensors that give information out. We've got UAVs now flying that are looking at that. And we've got other land-based information coming in. Think about the big data applications of taking all that unstructured information, and if we can stop that fire before it burns into a set of homes, or if we can save individuals from losing their lives, the meaning that we can derive from data. It's extraordinary. So I'm going to end here with a couple more examples, and then we'll open it up for questions. So I'll add one more, because we started the conversation with cybersecurity. So how many people read stuff about cybersecurity going on a weekly basis? Do you see a lot of exposure to it? No? Yeah, well, if you're not, you should, because it's extraordinary what's going on around the globe right now, and it's concerning. I don't know if you heard Secretary of Defense just a couple weeks ago talk about the concern to the extent that there's the opportunity for a Pearl Harbor in this space globally. So what is going on is there is very formalized criminal activity, which I think everybody gets, right? I mean, there's people out there trying to take your identity and steal directly from you, but there's also a lot of nation-state sponsored activity that goes on day in and day out with governments pitting themselves against others to try to make sure that they have information. They steal intellectual property, that they have access to our networks and can do severe damage, and we could not operate at will when we need to. And one of the issues with cybersecurity is that you've got to see what's happening in your network. So we collect and store enormous amounts of data every day. If you think about a 120,000 person organization, such as the one that I worked at, and the amount of emails that went through, there were about 1 million valid emails and about 3 million emails, including all the spam and everything that was going on. And if you're trying to find one email in those 3 million that had a malicious payload in it in which someone was trying to compromise your network, you got a big data problem on your hands. And so one of the most interesting areas in which we're working right now across the board and around the globe is how do you find that information. In many cases, it's not a known pattern of behavior. So it takes everything we've just talked about big data, real-time ingest, very unstructured sets of information, and trying to find that needle in the haystack to stop individuals from accessing and compromising networks. So in the cybersecurity arena, there's great promise for big data. This chart in front of you shows some of the technologies that are being used. I will hit that very quickly. There was a stat up there that said we need 100,000 statisticians and mathematicians. That's very real. It's an extraordinarily important part of what's going on here, but we need computer scientists, we need business analysts, and we need generally all around very smart people who are interested in solving some of the most complex business challenges and national issues on the globe. That's the list of capabilities that most individuals who are going to get into big data as a career, but I kind of started these comments by saying, really, no matter what you choose to do in your life, if you can find the most meaning from the data that's around you, you will best succeed in whichever mission you choose to execute. These are a few things to be aware of as you go down this path. It is a Very, very progressive area. There's a great deal of activity going on. And the reality is that you've got to build upon a strong analytical capability. It's good business sense. It's good common sense. There is no silver bullet or magic or management by miracle to any of this. You've got to have good skill sets and you've got to have good business sense, but you can take these latest technologies, processes, and approaches to be very, very successful. And this is really a great, great opportunity. The elephant that is there is Hadoop. If nobody's seen the kind of icon for Hadoop, which is the largest technology approach right now, which came out of Google and the Apache Hadoop process. This is a brave, brave new world. The opportunities are extraordinary. And I can assure you that if you invest in these skills, and they're base business skills to begin with, but if you build upon those and you understand the importance of how these things come together, and you can make those correlations and you can predict what's going to happen, you will be extraordinarily successful. So I wanted to thank you for taking time out today with me. I know I'm going to open it up to questions.